is a demographic that I think can really disrupt this world. So my path actually to the nonprofit sector was, I grew up in LA, and I moved out to the East Coast to go to school. And so I went to Philly, I went to Penn for my undergrad, and that's really where I fell in love with education, I guess. And they were really encouraging what they call service learning projects. So basically in Philadelphia, UPenn, I don't know if you guys know UPenn, but it's adjacent to one of the worst communities in the States, right? Economically very depressed West Philadelphia, famously known by, I think, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, West Philadelphia, right? And so they would always encourage us not to go past 40th Street, and I always wondered why. It's because they said, you know, you get shot up, you get mugged. But what was really fascinating is that the college really encouraged scholars and students to go out there and really become part of the solution making to a lot of the community issues and problems. And through that, I realized that, you know what, there is a greater purpose of education. This service learning pedagogy, it was something that I had never encountered. It was always sort of, education was something very insular for me, very insulated. But to really think about using the education to go out, to discuss with classmates, to come up with problems, you know, to solutions together with the community. It was something that I really started to, it changed my paradigm about what, I guess, education, the purpose of education was. So I took that, and then I was like, I'm fascinated by education. I want to go to grad school for education, but my dad, being very entrenched in his Korean ways, he pretty much said, and no offense to anybody here, but this is what he said to me. He said, education is for women. That's what he said. Like, and I don't know where that comes from. I still am like, you know Korean dads, they say things that just don't make any sense sometimes. And he discouraged me. So I actually went into the financial sector, I guess. Hated it. You know, made decent money, but I hated every single day of my life. And then I eventually just quit my job. Parents almost disowned me at that point, and I enrolled into Columbia for grad school, teachers college actually. Loved my experience there. Started a service learning curriculum for a school in East Harlem, and it was based on actually hip-hop literacy and culturally relevant pedagogy. And so just really sort of, you know, honing and refining sort of that aspect, that my passion. And then a professor, I took international, I had no interest actually in the international space, but I took an international education course, and the professor encouraged me to get out to Nairobi just to meet some people, and that there were some cool things happening in terms of service learning that I might find interesting. So I was like, why not? So I had graduated, and I like traveling, and so I just went out to Nairobi, and it was just, I was just blown away. And that was my first encounter, not only with, you know, poverty, extreme poverty, but also with, you know, with this idea of slums, urban slums. And the person I met there, I had met a bunch of school directors, and there was a gentleman I met who basically, he was sponsored by some organization in the States to go all the way up to college. He graduated with a college degree. And to think that 65% of the entire city of Nairobi live in urban slums and only about 20% graduate from college is like the cream of the crop in terms of society. But what he decides to do is he decides to come back into his urban slum where he grew up and start a primary school there. And you know, he gave up, I guess, quote unquote, the Nairobian dream, I guess, right? And he decided to come back and really sort of use his education to transform communities. And when I thought about that, I was like, wow, that's really sort of the heart behind what service learning is about. And it really sort of shook me a little bit. And it really reminded me, you know, yeah, you know, you can go get the best degrees in the States. At that point, I had gotten a degree from Penn and Columbia, and it would be, I guess, an envy of a lot of people. But when I heard Muscat's story and just his heart, I remember coming back on the flight and just journaling and just, writing that if this man could stand up and defend, his community and his children, I can play my part as well. And so I came back and I had no idea how to start a nonprofit. I didn't even know how it would even survive. But I came back and I started a nonprofit, incorporated, did all that legal stuff, and then literally started to ask people for money. And Koreans, being Koreans, we are not good at asking for money. We're not good at asking for anything. Very shy, you know what I mean? And so it was very challenging in the beginning, but still had that passion, that vision. And the first year struggled a lot, maybe raised about 70,000, which is still very good, right? But it was a lot of family and friends. Second year, we raised close to about, first year we only raised about 40,000. Second year we raised about 70,000. And during that time, I had gone back to school to get a degree in international education policy at Harvard. And really, it was one of those defining moments where I had to make a choice, right? Is that, okay, so I have all these degrees, right? I still have a dream and a passion. I have this great idea to really sort of integrate service learning curriculums and build secondary schools in these urban slums. But I was literally, starving, right? I would not eat because I just didn't have money, right? I would literally scrounge up pennies just to get that Frito-Lays in the vending machine. And it came to a point where, and this kind of comes full circle, is that I started to really doubt whether this was something that I should be getting myself into, right? My parents were in California. So, what's the Korean word for it? Like, 속상해? Is that right? I'm not good at Korean, but they're very heartbroken. Just to see their son, who they aspired for such great things, and in their mind it was such a disappointment. But just at that moment, I just really sort of it was one of those decisions you have to make in life where you either could fold or you could really just continue forward, and I did. And this year, just with that, we've been able to raise close to about 300,000, and now we have a staff of, like I told you, staff of about 8. We don't get paid a lot. It's not necessarily yet a very sustainable job, but it's something that we're really striving towards. And there's some pictures. And so, just to kind of wrap up a little bit, I'm not saying that all of you should get into the nonprofit space, right? I think that some of you guys have such great gifts in terms of, maybe the private sector, and we need you guys, right, to really fund our projects and to really support in terms of really thinking about even, accounting systems and financial systems and things like that. Even medicine, guys, I mean, there's, one area that we really want to expand is our health programs. And so we need a lot of global health, pre-med, you guys to really sort of latch onto the work that we do. But regardless of what you guys decide to do in terms of career, the one thing that I would really like to encourage you guys, and it's sort of a reflection of my experiences, and so I feel like I have a little bit of authority in terms of talking about this because I have sort of gone through a very untraditional path and narrative. It's sort of something that, I don't necessarily, it's nothing to boast about. It was a lot of enduring and suffering, and it was not an easy path to take. But I can really say now at the end of the road that it's something that I would never sort of trade. And I always sort of use this phrase when I was young, and when I was, like I said, struggling with this cultural identity, especially when my parents were always like, oh, education is so important. You need to go to Ivy League schools. You need to do X, Y, and Z. education, right? And as I was driving through Gangnam yesterday, the person driving was, oh, you gotta check out, there's like 60% of Hagwons on this road alone, and I was like, that's crazy, right? And I know Korea especially is very sort of obsessed with education. And so the question always is, what is education, right? What is the purpose of education? And I really like that verb, is, right? So education is. And I guess is what it represents to me is, I'm not like super crazy about grammar, but I know that is a linking verb. And it's a derivative of the verb to be, right? And so, especially in our culture, I think that that verb to be always gets blurred with to become, right? And the difference between I want to be something versus I want to become something. And when I think about that, I always think of our generation, and even especially Koreans and Korean Americans, we always are thinking about the next step, right? We're thinking about, okay, so I'm going to do this, go to Penn or NYU or Columbia or Harvard, and then I'm going to go to grad school, and then I'm going to get this job, and then X, Y, and Z, right? And even if you guys have the greatest idea in terms of social innovation, it's always 4 steps later, right? And I just want to sort of maybe suggest that if you want to think about education in terms of to be, in terms of what you are, a re-identification of who you are today is something that would really challenge you guys in how you approach life and how you approach the issues that surround you today, issues that surround your community and your world. And our urgency and my sort of plea with you in really asking you guys to really join in our efforts and join in just a larger effort to really transform this world. And so I found this poster to be, and it's not supposed to guilt you guys or anything, but it's just the truth, right? Is that if you have food in your fridge, clothes on your back, a roof over your head, and a place to sleep, you are richer than 75% of the world. It keeps on going. If you have money in the bank, your wallet, and some spare change, you are among the top 8% of the world's wealthy. And the last one's really sort of confronting is if you can read this message, you are more fortunate than 3 billion people in the world who cannot read at all, right? And the key verb here that I always love about this poster is that each one has you are, right? That today you are. It's not you will be, right? Is that all of us can probably attest to this and say that we are today, right? And so I would really, challenge you guys to think about that in terms of what you can do and how you can be a part of that change. Small steps, right? I mean, Arnold, he's so sort of inspiring to us, how much work he puts into the club and chapter. There's a lot of different sort of projects and programs that we run as an organization. And even if it's not getting connected to a nonprofit, but I know that some of you guys get involved with volunteer work. And I would really just ask that you guys don't do it just for, filling out college applications. And on that note, I've worked with a bunch of students on admissions, and everyone can see when it's just simply a line item versus whether you're truly passionate about seeking change. And I'll close by reminding you and challenging you that it's not something that the privileged just simply does for the underprivileged. Because what's beautiful is that in our work out in Nairobi right now, I remember the first time I was out there, and I remember 2 orphan boys, Peter and John, and they were sitting in a dark classroom, and everyone had gone out for lunch. And I remember asking them, why aren't you guys eating lunch? Do you guys want me to go get you food? And they told me, they said, you know, I know like we have to give up lunch every single day because we would rather pay that lunch money to pay for school fees every day. And I would ask them, okay, so why do you guys want education so badly? You guys should actually eat. And in my Western way of thinking, right, this was before I really got entrenched in our work. In my Western way of thinking, I was like, of course they want education, right? They want to, you know, ultimately leave the slum. They want to drive their Mercedes, and they want to live happily ever after, right? I guess the American dream, the meta narrative that we all sort of live by. And I remember they're so young but so profound, and they said, no, you know, I really want an education. And this is when there was actually no secondary school to go to. So imagine if all of you guys just didn't go here. Their education was stopped at grade 8, but they were fighting so hard just to get that, just that education. It didn't matter whether they got the degree. But I remember them saying, I want an education so badly because I want to become an engineer. And when I asked them why, they said, who else will come and take care of our community, the sanitation problems, the waste issues. And I remember Peter saying, I want to become a doctor because who else will take care of my community members? And it really sort of shook me because it was one of those things where maybe they have a better understanding of what our education means and the privilege it is to receive knowledge and education and to really immediately respond to the needs around our community. And so, you know, hopefully, you know, that inspires you guys as it's inspired me, and it just really becomes the fuel behind the work that I do, that our organization does, and hopefully it becomes really the fuel behind everything that you guys aspire to do in the future. And so, thank you, and I guess I'll open it up to any questions that you guys have. You can do about anything. It's free game. So thank you guys. What's your name? Tony, what's up, man?
Do you speak Swahili?
A little bit, yeah. Do you speak Swahili? Oh, cool. Where are you from? Oh, you're from Kenya? Oh, cool. What part of Nairobi? Okay. Cool. We'll talk later. That's awesome. Yeah.
Hi,
What's your name?
Joshua.
Jocelyn. Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Cool name. Yes.
I'm just wondering, like, you talk about all this like profit, just like working, and it's really hard, honestly, running nonprofit organizations. But what keeps you motivated every single day to do it, to go through all of that? Like, you talk about like you do have profit.
Yeah.
But is there something more? Is it just that?
Like I said, I think that, you know, obviously, it's hard. I mean, each day, you know, because when I'm out in the field, you know, obviously it would, you know, connect me, and it would, but being in New York, our offices are in New York City, and you just sort of get lost in paperwork, you get lost in, you know, managing and things like that. And so it is a struggle every single day. But I think for me, things like this inspire me. You know, when I see the seeds kind of being planted in the younger generation, I think that you guys can probably do so much more than I can. Right? The world is open to you guys. It's open to me, and the opportunities that exist for you guys to really carve out, you know, some really great ideas. And so things like this really inspire me. Even my staff. We have 8 staff, 3 out in Nairobi, and 60% of our staff are Korean Americans. And to see young Korean Americans like have an opportunity to go into a really great job, and ours is a great job too, but you know, that inspires me. People like Arnold and all of you guys who are involved in the chapter, you guys really inspire the work that we do. And so, you know, not feeling like, in the beginning it really felt like I was alone in this entire battle. But really knowing that we have this kind of core and this army of people, I think it's something that drives me every single day, that we have, you know, that ultimately it's not just going to be our organization that solves the world's problems, but, you know, really being encouraged by people who are were really coming on board, and other organizations that we, really kind of empathize with and trudge along together with. Yeah, good question though. Your name? Lumina. Oh, geez, it's not way. I don't feel left out anymore. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
So, like, when you go to teachers, like, most students don't
Sure. Go teach.
So how do you, like, think of?
Yeah. So initially, actually, I was actually gonna. I went to Columbia because I wanted to start a charter school in the Bronx, New York. And so, like I said, I had no interest in the international education space. And again, nonprofit was something that was way out there. I actually thought nonprofits were a little sketchy, to be honest with you. Just with my experiences being harassed by the Red Cross on the street and always wondering where their money went to. I was very skeptical, but it was one of those things where it really was that trip I took out to Kenya, that really sort of made me think in terms of maybe what I could be really sort of used for is this nonprofit space where, truth be told is that Arnold, being connected to Arnold through this nonprofit, I would say is providential in terms of, I think that's some of the fruits that bear when you you start a nonprofit and people get connected that way. And so, I guess, yeah, it's just really something that I never planned for. It kind of happened, and yeah, it's one of those things.
I'm Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi. Yeah. I heard about your supply has programs where you take students directly to
Yeah.
see with their eyes what's happening. Can you share a bit about it?
Yeah, so we have a research program that we run in the winter and in the summer, and it's open to high school students, and we pair, like I told you about the college fellowship program, but we actually fund the college students to lead these teams, and we actually have a staff member who leads these teams out, and we participate in different activities, but it's really engaging. We engage in sort of research activity, and so the last summer trip, the students actually did so the thing about slums is that there's not a lot of census data, so there's not even a lot of general basic data available for these populations. And so firsthand, the students did cross-sectional survey data, and so started from how to really sort of come up with a survey that takes out biases, that really addresses questions, methodologies of research, whether it's surveys, interviews. So really, that process is something that we value a lot in terms of how to really do proper research out in the field, and then actually doing first-hand research, and obviously getting just a first-hand experience of what the situation's out there. And a lot of our chapter leaders are former alums of this program, and so people obviously come back very fired up to really do something after. But it's a great program because we actually require each participant to do a literature review and our staff member is very singular about citations. And so it's a very good sort of program overall where we're just not taking kids out and going on polymer tours, but it's more about really trying to understand the problem and the history of the problem and really finding your niche in terms of your research interest. And tackling that issue and hopefully continuing that on. And we had a girl who I told you about to go to Cornell. I don't know if I told you about her, but she was going to be a pre-med. She went on her trip and decided to go into the public health school at Cornell. And now she just wants to she keeps contacting us to get more information, and she wants to continue to refine her research as she's in Cornell as well. And she wants to look at, she's doing a school study on green tea and HIV prevalence rates. And so, that's what she started when she went out on the trip, and then she's continuing that on in college. So, it's a great program. Yeah. Hi, Joanna. Good question. So the question was, there's a lot of nonprofits out there, and what makes the supply stand out? Okay. It's obvious, isn't it? No. That's a hard question. I mean, I think that for us, I would say that we're very engaged in terms of, because the thing is, in terms of nonprofits, and there's always a competition for, just to be totally honest, there's a competition for the dollar, right? So if there's 100 of you guys in here, and I'm sure, every nonprofit would want to somehow get a donation from each and every one of you guys, or for you guys to become an advocate or investor. The one thing that we stay very true to is that we don't, use any guilt tactics. We don't necessarily, if you watch any of our media and any of our ask for pitches, we never ask for money, right? And third is we are very we're a little bit snobbish on the side of we fall on the fault of actually trying to build the issue too well, right? Is that we're not a very traditional nonprofit where the issue might get watered down. It's just simply a relief or aid effort. For us, we look at systems and we want to really understand the urban slum crisis and how secondary school education best would, really support that. And so I would probably say that the culture of our organization is that if you come to our staff meetings, you would almost think that it's like a discussion in a college, because we are really invested in really understanding the issue. And that comes from top down. I don't want to just be a nonprofit that makes a lot of money and somehow just finds schools, hundreds of them, because Oprah could do that too. Right? She could do it faster than us. But for us, it's really understanding the communities and really seeing how we can really make an impact long term. Because the world doesn't need us, to be honest, right? I think that the world doesn't need a lot of the nonprofits that exist, right? There's a lot of local agency, a lot of just, there's vibrancy in local communities that just simply need to be supported. And I think that too many nonprofits take on the role of, we're going to go and change. We're going to change these communities, and we're going to try to make so much money and raise so much money because there's such an urgent need. But what we realize is that, there's a need, but there's also so much capacity in these slum communities that they just really need that kind of support system that we provide too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I could probably go more after or something, yeah.